The final hours have begun. The Chosen Season 6 does not ease us into the story. It throws us straight into the storm that will end in the most painful day humanity has ever witnessed. The crucifixion of Jesus is no longer a prophecy waiting to unfold. It is here, pressing down on every disciple, every enemy, and every watching soul. The first look at this season is more than a preview. It is a reminder that betrayal, cruelty, and heartbreak are about to collide in one night that will change the world forever. What we thought we were prepared to face will crush us all over again, because this is not just history retold, this is the moment that rips through time itself. And The Chosen Season 6 dares to show us the last day in a way that will break even the strongest heart. The Chosen Season 6 begins in the suffocating darkness of a night already stained with betrayal. Judas has delivered his master into the hands of soldiers, and the ripples of that act spread like fire through the hearts of the disciples. Rage burns in Peter, confusion paralyzes John. Fear grips the others as torches slice through the shadows of Gethsemane. What should have been a night of prayer and peace has been torn apart by chains, shouts, and the bitter taste of treachery. Every detail feels heavier, every silence louder, because the weight of what is coming presses against the air itself. Jesus does not resist. This is what makes the moment unbearable. Surrounded by armed men, accused by priests who tremble at his very presence, he chooses surrender. His calmness collides with the fury of those who want him destroyed. We watch as he is dragged from one chamber to another, questioned, mocked, and struck, yet never broken. And in that silence, in that refusal to defend himself, lies a power greater than any sword. The first look at Season 6 confirms that the story will not shield us from the pain. It will force us to see the cruelty, the injustice, and the loneliness of the night when love was treated as a crime. But the true devastation comes not from the enemies outside, but from the weakness within. Peter, bold and fiery, crumbles when confronted by a servant girl's question. 3 times he denies the one he swore to never abandon. Each denial cuts deeper than the last, until the crow of a rooster pierces the night and shatters his soul. That sound, simple yet crushing, becomes the echo of failure that will haunt him long after the torches fade. The first look reveals just enough of this moment to remind us that betrayal is not only Judas's burden. Even the strongest will falter when the darkness closes in. And yet, while the disciples scatter, while fear consumes them, Jesus stands firm. Taken before Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin, he faces a storm of lies and false witnesses. Voices shout over each other, twisting stories, desperate to paint him as a threat. But their chaos only exposes their emptiness. When asked if he is the Messiah, his answer does not tremble. "You have said so." Words so simple, yet they strike the council like thunder. Rage erupts, robes are torn, accusations scream through the night. And still he does not resist. Still he does not run. The calmness of his presence becomes more terrifying to his enemies than any weapon ever could be. This is the heart of Section 1. The last day begins not with nails or a cross, but with silence, betrayal, and choices that carry eternal weight. We are shown that Jesus could have escaped. He could have fought. But instead, he walks willingly into suffering because he knows this is the only path to redemption. And for us, as viewers, the first look at Season 6 forces a realization. This is not simply a story of injustice, but of purpose. Every blow, every denial, every false word spoken against him is part of a greater plan unfolding in the shadows. The atmosphere is unbearable. The night is thick with dread. Disciples hide in the shadows, afraid to speak his name. Guards mock and beat him as if cruelty itself has been unleashed. The council, blinded by pride, rages against him with fury that feels more like madness than judgment. And yet, in the center of it all, stands Jesus, steady, unbroken, carrying a strength that is not of this world. This is the power of Season 6's opening. It doesn't just show us events, it drags us into them, forcing us to feel the despair, the injustice, and the weight of a night that will lead to the cross. What makes it even more painful is knowing that this is only the beginning. The first look makes one thing clear. Every step from here on will draw us closer to the crucifixion, closer to the darkest hour. But as heavy as it feels, we cannot look away, because buried in this storm is the seed of the greatest victory the world has ever known. The night refuses to end, and every hour drags Jesus deeper into the hands of those who seek his destruction. After the fury of Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin, he is pushed, chained, and humiliated, dragged through the shadows like a criminal. The leaders who should have sought truth now twist it beyond recognition, desperate for one outcome only: death. And yet, their desperation reveals their weakness. They cannot agree on a charge. They cannot agree on a testimony. Lies stumble over each other. Voices clash in contradiction, and still the hatred grows. The first look at Season 6 shows this chaos with terrifying clarity. Not through action, but through the suffocating weight of injustice. We are forced to sit inside the madness of a trial that was never about guilt or innocence. It was always about silencing the light. What makes this moment almost unbearable is the silence of Jesus. When accusations are hurled like stones, he does not flinch. When struck across the face, he does not curse. His calmness stands as the greatest challenge to his enemies. For all their noise, for all their rage, he answers with the strength of quiet truth. And that silence becomes louder than any cry of defense ever could. It exposes their fear, their emptiness, and their blindness. Every second reminds us that his fate is not in their hands. It was chosen long before this night began. But while Jesus stands firm, the disciples fall apart. Scattered into the night, they are torn between loyalty and terror. The rooster's crow still echoes in Peter's ears, a sound that has broken his heart in ways no sword ever could. He hides in the shadows, guilt swallowing him whole, his courage shattered. And Peter is not alone. Others run, others hide, each one shaken by the collapse of their own strength. This is the haunting contrast of Season 6. The Son of Man stands unbroken, while those who swore to follow him crumble under fear. The story spares no one from this truth. Even the closest to him cannot carry the weight of this night. As dawn approaches, the trial shifts into something darker. Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin have reached their verdict, but their authority alone is not enough. They need Rome. They need the governor to seal the death they crave. And so Jesus is dragged again, chains rattling, face bruised, body beaten, into the court of Pontius Pilate. The first look at this scene reveals the cold contrast between Jewish fury and Roman indifference. Pilate does not rage like the priests. He does not burn with jealousy or fear. Instead, he appears detached, almost weary, caught between a mob demanding blood and his own unwillingness to find fault in this man. Pilate questions him, searching for a reason to justify the crowd's hatred, but Jesus does not plead. He does not argue. His answers are simple, fearless, steady. "My kingdom is not of this world." Words that cut through the shallow power of Rome like a blade sharper than any sword. And yet, they only deepen Pilate's confusion. Here stands a man beaten, mocked, abandoned by his own people, yet he speaks of a kingdom that cannot be touched. Pilate feels the weight of this truth, but cannot bear to carry it. Fear flickers in his eyes. Fear not of Jesus, but of the crowd outside, the priests screaming for crucifixion, and the fragile politics that bind him. And so begins the tug-of-war between conscience and cowardice. Pilate offers compromise. He thinks perhaps a beating will satisfy the mob. Perhaps humiliation will quench their thirst for blood. But the leaders outside are relentless. No lash, no mockery, no punishment short of death will silence their rage. The crowd grows louder, their voices becoming a roar, demanding crucifixion. The first look reveals glimpses of this growing fury. Torches in the daylight, fists raised in unison, the sound of voices that refuse to be calmed. And through it all, Pilate hesitates, torn between justice and survival, between truth and the fear of losing power. Meanwhile, the soldiers take their turn unleashing cruelty. They strip him, mock him, twist thorns into a crown, and press it deep until blood runs down his face. They dress him in a robe, bowing in fake worship, spitting as they laugh. The brutality is not just physical. It is meant to humiliate, to break him in spirit. But the first look shows us that he remains steady, carrying the weight with a strength they cannot comprehend. Every mockery, every strike, every insult only exposes the depth of his purpose. He endures not because he is powerless, but because he has already chosen the cross. The trial is not about evidence. The mockery is not about justice. It is about the clash between truth and blindness, love and hatred, light and darkness. And as the story moves closer to the inevitable verdict, we realize that every attempt to escape, Pilate's hesitation, the crowd's frenzy, the disciples' fear, only proves one thing: this moment cannot be stopped. The crucifixion is no longer a shadow on the horizon. It is a sentence that grows heavier with every breath. The first look at season 6 leaves us trembling because it reveals the collision of human weakness and divine strength. Pilate, Caiaphas, Judas, Peter, the soldiers, the crowd, all play their part in the storm. And in the center stands Jesus, beaten yet unbroken, humiliated yet undefeated, silent yet more powerful than all their rage combined. This section does not give us relief, only the tightening of a noose that we know will end at Calvary. The moment of decision finally arrives, and it is darker than anything the disciples or the crowds could have imagined. Pilate stands before the people, his voice weary, almost pleading, asking what crime demands such punishment. But the roar of the mob swallows his hesitation. "Crucify him!" The words thunder again and again, each repetition striking like a hammer on iron, sealing the verdict. The priests stir the people, the crowd surges forward, and any hope of mercy collapses under the weight of blind rage. Pilate washes his hands, a fragile attempt to free himself of guilt. But the stain of this moment cannot be erased. History will always remember him as the governor who delivered an innocent man to death. And so Jesus is handed over. Chains rattle, soldiers sneer, and the sentence is set: crucifixion. The word itself carries a horror that defies description. It was not just execution, it was humiliation, torment, and slow death by design. And this is where The Chosen Season 6 strikes at the core of our hearts. Because we are not just watching a man condemned, we are watching the Son of God embrace the very suffering that should have been ours. The weight of this truth presses into every frame, every line, every silence. The journey to the cross begins, and it is more brutal than anything we have seen before. The soldiers lead him through the streets, forcing him to carry the heavy beam upon his torn shoulders. Each step grinds against the bruises already covering his body. Each stumble is met with jeers, whips, and cruel laughter. The crowd that once shouted for miracles now shouts for blood. Faces twisted with hatred line the road, mocking the one who only ever healed, forgave, and loved them. This is the heartbreak of Section 3, to see love rejected, to see kindness crushed under the weight of human cruelty. And yet, even here, even on this road of humiliation, moments of truth break through. A woman pushes through the mob, her face streaked with tears, reaching for him. Another voice cries out in grief, recognizing the horror of what is unfolding. And then, Simon of Cyrene is seized from the crowd, forced to carry the cross when Jesus stumbles beneath its weight. What feels like a random act of Roman authority becomes a picture of something greater. The burden of the cross shared, even for a moment, by one who never expected to bear it. The Chosen captures this contrast with devastating simplicity. The disciples, scattered and broken, watch from the shadows. Their hearts are torn between fear and sorrow, unable to stop what is happening, unable to believe what their eyes are seeing. Mary, his mother, is there too, her silence heavier than any scream. Her eyes hold both the pain of a mother watching her son destroyed and the faith of a believer who knows that even this must come to pass. It is almost too much to endure, and yet we cannot turn away because the story is moving toward the moment that will define all of history. At Golgotha, the hill of the skull, the full horror is revealed. Soldiers stretch him across the wooden beams, and iron nails are driven through flesh and bone. The sound is sickening, final, echoing across the hilltop. Each strike is not just against his body, but against the hearts of all who watch. The pain is unimaginable, but the humiliation is worse. Stripped, lifted, displayed for all to see, he hangs between criminals as if he were the worst among them. This is the crushing truth. The King of Kings treated as the lowest of men. The sky above begins to darken, as though creation itself cannot bear the sight. The air feels heavy, suffocating, pressing down on everyone present. And even in this agony, he speaks words that silence the chaos. Not curses, not cries for revenge, but forgiveness. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." The weight of those words is almost unbearable. In the face of cruelty, he offers mercy. In the face of hatred, He gives love. The Chosen Season 6 does not let us escape this paradox. It forces us to feel it, to wrestle with it, to break under it. The mockery does not stop. Soldiers gamble for his clothes. Leaders shout insults, daring him to save himself. Even one of the criminals beside him mocks. And yet, the other turns, broken, desperate, pleading to be remembered. And in that moment, hope pierces the darkness. Today, you will be with me in paradise. A promise spoken not in a throne room, not in a temple, but from a cross. This is the brilliance of the story. Hope rising in the place of despair, life offered even in the shadow of death. As the hours drag on, the agony deepens. The disciples, though distant, feel the weight of every moment. Mary remains close, her grief beyond words. And the sky continues to darken, the world itself trembling under the weight of this hour. Section 3 ends with the cross towering above the crowd, not as a symbol of defeat, but as the stage where the greatest act of love is unfolding, and we know that the breaking point is near. The crucifixion is not finished. The final words are yet to be spoken, and the world is about to change forever. The hours on the cross stretch into eternity. Each breath Jesus takes is drawn through searing pain, every word forced through exhaustion and torment. The crowd that roared with fury now falls into uneasy silence as the sky itself begins to tremble. Darkness spreads unnaturally across the land, a shadow that feels like judgment, pressing down on every heart that dares to watch. What was once a scene of mockery becomes one of fear. The earth seems to cry out against the injustice unfolding on that hill. This is the moment when the story of The Chosen Season 6 reaches its most devastating point, and the weight of history crashes down on us without mercy. From the cross, Jesus speaks words that pierce deeper than any sword. He looks upon his mother standing near and entrusts her to the beloved disciple. Even in agony, his heart is for others, not himself. He thirsts, and a sponge soaked in vinegar is lifted to his lips, another cruel mockery of his suffering. The soldiers may laugh, the leaders may sneer, but creation itself is not silent. Thunder rolls in the distance, the ground quivers beneath their feet, and the darkness grows thicker as though the world itself prepares for the breaking point. And then comes the cry, a voice filled not with defeat, but with finality. My God, why have you forsaken me?" The words cut like lightning through the silence, echoing the prophecy of old, carrying the weight of abandonment, the weight of sin, the weight of every failure and betrayal laid upon him. The disciples who still linger in the distance tremble at the sound, their faith shaken, their hearts shattered. This is the hour they never wanted to face, the moment when their hope seems to collapse into dust. The Son of Man, the one they believed would never fall, now hangs before them, broken and bloodied, crying out in anguish. But the story does not end in despair. With his final strength, Jesus lifts his head and speaks the words that will change the world forever. It is finished. The declaration is not of defeat, but of completion. The mission, the purpose, the burden he carried, all brought to their fulfillment in this one final breath. And then, with quiet surrender, he commits his spirit into the hands of his Father. His head bows, his chest stills, and silence falls heavier than ever before. The Son of God has died. In that instant, the earth itself erupts. The ground shakes violently, splitting stones, tearing through the temple veil. What human hands meant for cruelty becomes a moment marked by cosmic upheaval. The separation between God and man, symbolized for centuries by that veil, is ripped apart from top to bottom. Even hardened soldiers tremble, their arrogance broken by the power they cannot deny. One centurion, struck by the terror of what he has witnessed, whispers the words that echo into eternity. Truly, this was the Son of God. The disciples scatter in grief, their faith buried under the weight of loss. Mary weeps in silence, her heart pierced with sorrow deeper than words can express. The city around them does not rejoice. It quakes, unsettled by the darkness and the tremors that refuse to fade. And yet, in the midst of the devastation, a truth lingers like a faint light through the storm. This is not the end. The crucifixion feels like the breaking of all hope, but hidden within its agony lies the seed of victory. The first look at Season 6 refuses to give us comfort. It leaves us in the silence of that moment, standing at the foot of the cross, broken, shaken, and undone. It forces us to face the horror of the price paid, the depth of betrayal, the cruelty of men, and the love of a Savior who endured it willingly. By the time the scene fades, we are left with nothing but the crushing silence of a world without Jesus. And that silence is deafening. This is how Season 6 delivers its most devastating blow. Not with spectacle, not with escape, but with raw truth. The crucifixion of Jesus in all its agony, injustice, and glory. It leaves us trembling, knowing that this moment was not the end of his story, but for now, it feels like the end of everything. The last day has broken us, just as it broke the disciples, and the shadow of the cross now stretches over all of history.